So think about this. What if the exact things you do to keep your life perfectly safe are, like, actually destroying your potential?
Yeah, I mean, that is a terrifying thought to entertain, right? Because we are fundamentally wired to crave control. We want predictability, but complete psychological control is, well, it's actually a dead end.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine for a moment that you just bought a new house and you spend weeks getting it meticulously clean.
Uh-huh.
Every single piece of furniture is in its exact designated spot.
Yeah.
There is no dust, there is no clutter, just absolute perfection.
Sounds great on paper.
Right, but very quickly you realize a massive problem. If you want to keep the house that perfect, you can't actually live in it.
No, you really can't.
You can't paint a picture, you can't cook a messy, complicated meal, and you certainly can't have friends over who might, accidentally spill a drink on the rug.
Yeah.
The house is completely safe, yes, but it is completely sterile.
Mm-hmm.
No art, no growth, and no messy creativity can ever happen there.
It ceases to be a home, really, and just becomes a
Yeah.
museum. You basically trade the vitality of living for the absolute security of control.
And that tension, that exact pull between the messy, unpredictable reality of living and the sterile safety of total control is exactly what we are exploring today. Welcome to today's deep dive.
It's a big one.
It really is. Our mission today is to deeply understand the core philosophies and the psychological principles inside clinical psychologist Jordan B. Peterson's book, Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life.
Uh-huh.
And to do this, we are drawing from a stack of fascinating sources. We've got excerpts from the book itself, a detailed rule-by-rule summary by Simone Smirelli, in-depth reviews from the Independent Institute by James F. Day and from Professor Andrew Timming,
Right.
as well as an interview with Peterson himself.
So we are really going to unpack a framework here that acts as like a masterclass in personal responsibility.
Yeah.
It's essentially a psychological map for how to balance the forces of order and chaos in modern life.
Now, before we jump in, I do need to make a quick but really crucial note. The sources we are working from discuss some highly politically charged concepts.
They definitely do.
Yeah, there are critiques of both progressive and conservative ideologies, as well as deep dives into Marxism and communism. And we want to be crystal clear with you. We're not taking any political sides here.
Exactly.
We are not endorsing the viewpoints of these ideologies, nor are we endorsing the author. Our only goal is to impartially report on the psychological and philosophical ideas contained in the original source material so you can examine them for yourself.
Right. Our focus remains entirely on the psychological architecture of these ideas. Like, how do they actually function in the human mind?
So, to understand that architecture, we need to look at how this material connects to its predecessor. Millions of people read Peterson's first book, 12 Rules for Life, which was explicitly subtitled An Antidote to Chaos. That first book took what you might classify as a more conservative psychological view. It warned against the dangers of too much unpredictability. Clean your room, get your life in order.
Yeah, establish a baseline.
Right. But Beyond Order flips the script entirely. It explores the exact opposite problem, which is the dangers of having too much structure. Which brings us back to that perfectly sterile house.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the psychological principle at play here is dynamic balance.
Okay.
We know that excess chaos brings profound uncertainty. It is terrifying when the ground is always shifting beneath your feet.
Yeah, it produces chronic anxiety.
Exactly. But excess order is equally dangerous, just in a quieter way. When we try to eradicate everything unknown from our lives, we stultify ourselves, we lose our curiosity.
Wow, yeah.
On an individual level, we lose our creative vitality, and on a societal level, an obsession with absolute control over every variable threatens us with totalitarianism. Meaning isn't found in either extreme. Humans find profound meaning exactly on the path that divides these two forces. You have to keep one foot firmly planted in secure, known order, while tentatively stretching the other foot out into the chaotic unknown.
Which, that sounds incredibly poetic in theory. But stepping into the unknown in real life is terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
If the unknown is inherently dangerous, how do you step into it without just being completely crushed by the anxiety of it all?
Well, the psychological map here suggests the answer is quite counterintuitive. You survive it by carrying a heavy load.
Carrying a load.
Yeah. Specifically, the engine of meaning is responsibility. Let's look at how that actually works in practice, particularly with Rule 4, which is about noticing that opportunity lurks where responsibility has been abdicated.
Right, because there is a profound crisis of aimlessness right now, isn't there?
Huge. Modern young people in particular often feel a deep sense of disenchantment. There is this pervasive feeling of being like owed by society.
A sense that the system is broken and therefore, why bother trying?
Exactly. But the psychological insight here flips that disenchantment on its head.
Mhm.
When you look at the world and think, things are not set right, this is deeply troubling to me. That isn't just a reason to complain.
Right.
That feeling is actually an indicator of destiny. It is your mind showing you precisely what has been left undone by others.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the antidote to that crushing aimlessness is shouldering what is referred to as a noble burden.
A noble burden. I like
Yeah.
that. Which requires taking aim, right?
Yeah.
This gets to rule 7 and rule 2.
Yeah.
You have to imagine who you could be and then aim single-mindedly at that.
Yes.
You pick a target and work as hard as you possibly can on at least one thing to see what happens.
Right.
The fundamental danger is aiming at nothing.
Precisely.
I struggle with this part, though, aiming single-mindedly at one specific thing, because in today's economy, we're constantly told to keep our options open.
Right, diversify.
Yeah, diversify your skills, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Doesn't locking yourself into one single path just set you up for a massive crisis if you pick the wrong thing? I mean, doesn't limiting yourself cause more anxiety?
It is a very modern fear, I'll give you that.
Yeah.
But behavioral psychology shows us the opposite is true. Keeping all your options open leads to the paralysis of infinite choice.
Okay.
If you aim at nothing, the immense array of possibilities manifests all at once, and it completely overwhelms your nervous system.
Just floods it.
Yeah, the text notes that a deeply conflicted person, someone who wants to go in 10 directions at once, can be stopped with the pressure of a single finger.
Wow.
They have zero forward momentum. But choosing a direction, even if it turns out to be imperfect, gives you a target, meaning requires a target. It is far better to become something than to remain anything but eventually become nothing.
Okay, I see the mechanism there. The momentum itself is the cure for the anxiety. But it's incredibly hard to build that momentum if you are constantly focused on the obstacles in your way. And this brings us to Rule 6, which requires abandoning ideology. There is a huge warning here against a concept called resentment.
Yeah, resentment is a crucial emotional mechanism to understand. It isn't just normal anger. It is a hostile, lingering resentment where you habitually blame the system or you blame successful people for your own failures.
That's like a toxic comfort blanket.
That is exactly what it is. And the advice to combat this is harsh but ultimately empowering. You must assume that you are the enemy.
You are the enemy.
Yeah, you have to fix your own flaws before you try to reorganize the world, because think about what happens if you don't.
Right.
If you are harboring unexamined bitterness, laziness, or deceit, and you try to fix society, you are simply exporting your own internal chaos into the world. You're making the system worse while pretending to save it.
So to actually aim forward, you have to stop lying about where you currently are.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this mechanism of lying to ourselves, because this leads into one of the most fascinating themes, which is confronting our own darkness. Rule 3 gives us a clear directive. Do not hide unwanted things in the fog.
The fog.
This idea of the fog is just brilliant. It is willful blindness.
It is the deliberate refusal to notice your own negative emotions, or, the refusal to have a necessary, deeply unpleasant argument with your partner.
Right. Think about a highly relatable everyday scenario. You know your bank account is overdrawn, but instead of logging in to look at the exact damage and make a budget, you just don't open the app.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind.
Or, a monster's under the bed, but you refuse to look. Feels like such a profound relief in the moment to just pull the covers up. But avoiding the micro-stress now guarantees a macro catastrophe later.
The psychological term for this is creating plausible deniability for yourself.
Right.
You pretend you didn't know the problem was there, so your ego doesn't have to take responsibility for fixing it, but the psychological bill always comes due. And we see the extreme end of this when dealing with trauma, which is covered in Rule 9. If old memories still upset you, write them down carefully and completely.
The clinical reality of unintegrated trauma is wild. The sources share a real-world example from a clinical practice. There was a client who had endured a severe traumatic event.
Yeah.
But because he had never recounted it and never faced it or spoken about it, his psychological symptoms were manifesting as actual physical ailments. He was physically carrying the unexamined past in his body.
It's like having a massively corrupted file running in the background of your computer's RAM.
Exactly.
It drains your battery, it makes the fan spin out of control, and it slows the entire system down because you haven't opened the file, debugged the code, and saved it properly to the hard drive.
That's a great analogy.
We understand the world through experience, and our brains use those experiences to map our path forward. If you don't voluntarily deconstruct a past trauma to extract its moral, to figure out how to avoid it next time, your nervous system remains stuck in high alert.
Just constantly scanning for threats.
Yeah, you are doomed to repeat the horrors in your imagination endlessly. You have to willingly confront the dragon to get the gold.
And sometimes the dragon isn't a massive Hollywood-level trauma from your childhood. Sometimes the dragon is the tiny compromises we make every single day.
Yes.
Rule 5 warns us, do not do what you hate. This highlights the hidden danger of participating in minor transgressions against your own conscience just to maintain a fake perception of stability.
Right, think about smiling and nodding at a toxic dynamic in your friend group.
Oh, yeah.
Or agreeing to unethical practices at work just to keep your job. When you say yes with your mouth but your entire nervous system is screaming no, you fracture your internal integrity.
That's powerful.
The piercing question raised here is, if you don't object to minor transgressions now, why presume you won't willfully participate when things get truly out of hand?
That is a terrifying mirror to look into. But it is necessary because personal responsibility doesn't exist in a vacuum. If you manage to clear this internal fog and stop making those minor transgressions, the responsibility immediately spills out from your mind and into your community.
Which brings us to Rule 1. Do not carelessly denigrate social institutions or creative achievement.
And this is where people get incredibly cynical today regarding our social institutions, right?
It is effortless to look at institutions, whether that's a university, a corporation, or a government body, and just see corrupt power structures.
Yeah.
But the argument made here is that competence, not mere power, is the actual bedrock of functioning institutions. Society shapes our personas, and rules ensure social harmony. We need those hierarchical structures bequeathed to us by the past to solve complex problems.
Professor Andrew Kimming's review really clarifies this. He points out that this framework isn't just a right-wing reactionary defense of the status quo, which is a common assumption people make.
Right.
It is actually a centrist argument for balanced integration. You defend the problem-solving structures of the past, that's the order, but you equally defend the creative transformations of the present. That's the chaos.
And one of the most vital forms of that creative transformation is art.
Yeah. Rule 8. Try to make one room in your home as beautiful as possible.
Exactly. And this isn't interior decorating advice.
No.
It is about the profound philosophical need for beauty. Think about the actual function of an artist. They are the ones teaching us how to see.
We need beauty to prevent us from dying of boredom, arrogance, and soul-deadening cynicism. Art represents that foot stretched out into the unknown.
Yes.
When you bring a piece of art into your home, you are bringing a managed, constrained piece of the chaotic, creative realm into your ordered structure. It is a literal, physical microcosm of the balance between order and chaos we've been talking about.
And that balance is tested nowhere more fiercely than in marriage and long-term relationships, which brings us to Rule 10.
Plan and work diligently to maintain the romance in your relationship.
Right. A complex relationship requires managing that exact tension daily, because relationships naturally degrade without intentional effort. They tend to slide into one of 3 distinct states of social being: tyranny, slavery, or negotiation.
I think we've all seen relationships that operate as tyrannies or master-slave dynamics. But how does that psychological slide actually happen?
It happens when couples step back into that fog we talked about earlier.
Right.
Everyday tyranny often looks like one person using emotional outbursts or passive aggression to control the climate of the house. Slavery is the other person constantly walking on eggshells, biting their tongue to avoid a fight.
It's exhausting.
It is. The core foundation to avoid that trap is the absolute commitment to not lie, honestly, negotiating everything.
Everything. Timming's review specifically points out the advice that women, for instance, should never subordinate themselves to their husbands,
Never.
even over something as seemingly mundane as what artwork to hang in the living room. Every single detail must be honestly negotiated.
Negotiation is the painful but necessary friction of sorting out 2 distinct realities. It requires both people to bravely articulate what they want and need, refusing the trapdoors of avoidance or sudden divorce.
Good, because if you use the trapdoor, you just carry all those unresolved problems, all that unintegrated trauma, and your terrible negotiating skills right into your next relationship.
You take yourself with you.
You do. So you tell the truth. You negotiate the small things. You clean up your past. You take responsibility. You bring beauty into your life. You do all of this, and yet life is still going to hit you with inherent horror and pain.
It is unavoidable.
People get sick. Car accidents happen. Existential tragedy is simply an inescapable fact of human life. So how do we survive the genuine tragedies without becoming malevolent and bitter?
That is the ultimate test of this entire psychological map, and it requires understanding the insidious nature of deceit covered in Rule 11. Do not allow yourself to become resentful, deceitful, or arrogant.
Okay.
Deceit comes in two forms: sins of commission, which is actively lying or doing something wrong, and sins of omission, which is just letting things slide when you know you should speak up.
Let's look at how deceit actually functions, because it operates exactly like an addiction. When you tell a lie, even a small sin of omission just to avoid a fight, you create a tiny alternate reality. To sustain that fake reality, you have to twist your next action to align with it. It requires more and more cognitive load to track both the truth and the lie. Your brain starts needing more lies to support the first one, just like needing a higher dose of a substance.
Exactly.
Eventually, your instincts are completely warped by the effort of maintaining the fake reality. You lose your internal compass entirely.
Which requires an incredibly strong, almost radical countermeasure when tragedy strikes, and that is Rule 12. Be grateful in spite of your suffering.
So what does this all mean for someone in the thick of it? Because this is a tough pill to swallow.
It is very tough.
How can we possibly expect people who are in genuinely dire, deeply unfair circumstances, maybe dealing with a terminal illness or a devastating financial loss, to just, be grateful? It borders on sounding like toxic positivity.
What's fascinating here is that it would be toxic positivity if it were passive. But gratitude in this psychological context is not a feeling of warm fuzzies.
Okay.
It is a highly conscious, deeply courageous attempt to defend against bitterness. Pain is inherent to existence. You cannot escape it. But suffering, specifically the amplified psychological suffering caused by resentment and despair, is a choice.
Peterson himself really struggled with this, didn't he?
Oh, deeply.
And the interview source we have, he admits this was the hardest principle for him to personally implement.
No.
He was facing severe compounding illnesses in his family, all while dealing with the isolation of the pandemic restrictions.
Yeah.
He said he was sorely tempted to just give in to the bitterness of how unfair it all was. But he found that actively practicing gratitude, literally forcing his mind to catalog what he still had to be thankful for, was the only functional defense. It was the only psychological mechanism that prevented pain-induced despair.
Because the alternative to gratitude is resentment. And bitterness is fundamentally counterproductive.
Yeah.
It acts as a corrosive acid that destroys you from the inside out and then destroys the people around you. Gratitude is the conscious assumption that there is enough good in you and in society to justify existence despite the inherent horror.
So if we synthesize all of this into a practical life framework, what are we looking at? The core message drawn from this masterclass is rigorous and demanding.
Very demanding.
Tell the truth, even when it makes your voice shake. Negotiate your relationships honestly, down to the smallest detail of who does the dishes. Voluntarily deconstruct and integrate your past traumas so they stop haunting your nervous system.
Right.
And above all, shoulder the heaviest burden of responsibility you can bear. That is how you walk the line. That is how you balance the chaotic, terrifying unknown with the secure, ordered known.
These are not abstract academic theories meant for a philosophy classroom. These are highly practical tools designed to combat the very modern epidemics of anxiety, distraction, aimlessness, and loneliness.
Yeah.
When you feel lost today, it is very likely because you are either drowning in the chaos of infinite choices with no target, or you are suffocating in the petrifying order of a perfectly sterile life where you have abdicated all your messy responsibilities.
It really all comes back to how we interact with the world and the people around us. And that brings me to a final thought, something for you to really mull over as you go about your day. When discussing the importance of our social institutions, there's a profound observation made about human sanity. It points out that people remain mentally healthy, not merely because of the integrity of their own isolated minds, but because they are constantly being reminded how to think, act, and speak by those around them.
It is a powerful paradigm shift. We do not maintain our sanity in isolation. We literally outsource a massive portion of our psychological regulation to our environment, our community, and the structures we embed ourselves in.
Which leaves you with a critical question to ask yourself today. Think about that perfectly sterile house we started with and the monster you might be ignoring under the bed. Look at the people, the routines, and the institutions you surround yourself with. Are they helping you negotiate the beautiful, terrifying messiness of life? Are they keeping you sane, honest, and courageous? Or are they quietly pulling you deeper into the fog?